Hello everybody, welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time here. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I am going to do a review of somebody else's Chinese instead of talking about my own Chinese level. So yeah, if you're here from Evildea's channel, which this video is in response to one of Evildea's videos, there are timestamps below, so if you want to skip this introduction part, you can get right to the review. If you're interested in knowing more about me and my qualifications, I'll talk more about myself right now. I'm gonna take this off though. Okay. I don't know how he does videos like that. Anyways, okay. So I'm Mason, and I've lived in Taiwan for around 5 years. I've learned Chinese for close to 8, I think. I went to university here in Taiwan. I graduated from国立台湾师范大学, and I majored in Chinese as a second language. And I guess that means I could teach Chinese. I'm qualified to, I guess. But I spent most of my time since graduating doing translating. I translated for TSMC in Arizona. I currently translate for a company in China doing video game translation. So yeah, I have a lot of exposure with this language, and I've studied it for a while. So I think I have some 1 or 2 cents I can add to this conversation here. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about here, I'm gonna actually evaluate somebody else's Chinese here. They make a bold claim when it comes to the amount of time that they took to get to where they are with their Chinese level. So I want to share my experience with learning Chinese and kind of use myself and my time with Chinese as a comparison to them, and then also talk about where I think their Chinese level is right now. So it all stems from this video right here. Am I wrong about Spencer's Chinese claims? Spencer claims to have gotten to a B1 level, basically, within 6 months. The actual claim was he said, I learned Chinese in 180 X amount of days. And for me, if I was going to say I learned a language, I would need to be at least at a B1 level for me to say that. For example, I am learning Korean right now, and I think my listening comprehension is at max in A2, and I don't know, maybe my speaking is at A1 if I'm doing really well that day. But I wouldn't even mention that I'm learning that language unless I'm talking about learning languages with somebody else. I would mostly just leave that out. But I think if you're at a B1, you can basically say you've learned the language or you're learning the language. I wouldn't try to claim fluency until you're at like B2 level. And I really wouldn't try to say that you're ready to be translating until you're at a high B2 or a C1. Anyways, he claims to have learned the language, which I'm assuming is to get to a B1 in 180 days. And he later claims to have gotten to a C1 level within a year. So I'm gonna pull this clip up real quick.
So, he responded in my comment section to me calling him out and asking questions, and he basically said, if you look at point 3 here, that he learnt Mandarin Chinese to a C1 level in 1 year. He does.
So I think that's a really bold claim. Really bold claim. He's from Canada, so his native language is English, I'm assuming. And for a native English speaker to have gotten to that level, it's I mean, in 1 year, it's just insane. So let's talk about my language learning progress. Like I said, I'm around a C1 at this point. And my reading, writing, speaking, and listening do fluctuate at different levels. But with some translation experience, most of them are around the same spot at around a C1. I haven't taken an actual standard test in around 2 years. I think I took the TOEFL around 2 years ago, and I got a C1 in one category and like a high B2 in another category. I'll post the exact results above here on the screen. But yeah, that was after like 5 years of learning the language already, and I was kind of just scratching the surface of C1. So for him to say that he got to C1 in 1 year, it's like a really insane claim. So using myself as an example, I started learning Chinese in 2017. I learned it for around 3 months in Taiwan at Evildea 大学 in Taichung. I was spending around 2 to 4 hours a day in a classroom, and then an additional 2 to 4 hours outside of class, spending time with friends, going out and about, ordering food in Chinese. And so overall, I was getting, let's say, an average of 6 hours a day of Chinese exposure, not necessarily intensive learning, but exposure to Chinese for 3 months. And I think I got to around an A1 level, maybe close to an A2, scratching the surface of an A2. So if somebody told me they spent like close to 8 hours a day intensely learning Chinese for 3 months and they got to an A2, I think that's not completely unrealistic. I think if they spent another 3 months and got to a B1, it'd be a really, really fast progression, but maybe plausible. Maybe they're just really talented. I don't know. That seems really pushing it. But to get to a B1 to an assumed B1 to a C1 in 6 months, I think is just impossible. I don't know how that's possible at all. So we'll evaluate his Chinese in a second, and I'll talk more about this, but I don't think he's at a C1 level. And I also don't completely disbelieve that it's only been 1 year since he started learning. So let's take a look at this video here. This one here. Speaking fluent Chinese in 1 year. So you see, I watched a lot of this already. Well, not a lot. I guess 7 minutes isn't that much. But I'm going to go through this again and talk about some key points and kind of talk about why I think he's not quite at a C1 level yet.
所以我可以告诉你，一会儿我可以告诉你为什么我选择这个名字吧。
Okay, so right now he's talking about the name that he's chosen in Chinese, which is 大龙. I don't have any problems with the name, cool name. He does say 我选择了这个名字. Let me see that again.
所以我可以告诉你，一会儿我可以告诉你为什么我选择这个名字吧。
为什么我选择这个名字吧? I would say in Taiwan, I do want to put a little asterisk here. Most of the time I spent learning Chinese has been in Taiwan. So if people say things differently in China, feel free to write a comment down, about that down below. But in Taiwan, people will ask me too, why did I choose my Chinese name, Cao Meisun? They'll ask me, how did you come up with that? And in Chinese, they say, 你怎么取这个名字? They use 取. They don't usually say 选择. So I think that's, to me, that means that he doesn't have a full grasp of how this is used contextually, how this verb is used contextually, 选择. But he's using it in a way that I can still understand what he means.
首先我是在一个住在加拿大的多伦多的学生，那我刚刚到了1年学习的时间，所以
Another thing too here is he says 学习. Typically in Taiwan, I'm assuming in China as well, I have to put an asterisk again as well, but the verbs like simple verbs like study, 学习, and choose, 选择, we normally will just use the first character. So 你要选哪一个? 你学了哪一种语言? I wouldn't say 你学习了哪一种语言. That 习 or 选择的 I would just leave out. It's not necessary, and I think most people just leave it out. So to me, this is a sign that he's closer to a B1, B2 level than a C1.
所以现在当然我不是一个完美的学生，但是呢，我非常爱学习中文，所以那这个东西算我的爱好吧。所以真的是我的荣幸来到你们的博客，谢谢你们。
哦，很流利哦，很流利哦
，1年这么流利
，1年耶，
目前听起
不
来
敢当。
So in Chinese right now, they're saying you're so fluent. I do want to say fluency does not equal Sefer level. So you can be a very fluent B1. That is very possible. And I'm kind of leaning towards that's where he's at. If you're just that kind of natural speaker and you have a good grasp of the vocabulary that you have acquired, being fluent at a B1 level, I think is super attainable for the right kind of person. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a B2 or C1 when it comes to vocabulary and grammar usage.
大龙对我们母语者来说，不算是一个不是一种很新潮的名字了啊，但是也蛮有意思的。你先讲一下大龙为什么叫自己大龙呢？
当然可以，没问题。就是
See, in that explanation there, he also did not use the word 选择 when it comes to the name. He said, 你为什么叫自己大龙? So, again, I don't see 选择 being used often with choosing a name, but maybe I'm on some point that's really not that important. I don't know.
哥，比如说我的女朋友是一个中文母语者，首先你要知道这件事。
So he says 你要知道这件事. I think he's saying you should know that first. I think that's what he's trying to say. 你要知道这件事. I would probably say 你们知道吧 or 你们知道 or 你们要知道你要先知道你要先了解这件事你不用加可以不加 I think that's not I don't know to me the way that he phrases the sentence it sounds to me like a lot like how I talked when I was a B2 speaker when I was in my second year of university
然后他曾经给我听一下一个歌叫什么
So he says 一个歌 that's a measure word issue. It's a very common issue for people learning Chinese. They get the wrong measure word. The proper measure word would be 首 so 一首歌 but perfectly understandable still nevertheless.
所以我就选择好，我选择我的
所以我就选择 I think 我就决定了 I think is a better verb to use instead of 选择 So this is common again he's repeating a lot of words so that suggests to me that it's a limited vocabulary. Another thing too is that a lot of his conjunctions his connector words are repeating or his functional words like 首先 initially or at first that word he repeats that a lot 选择 he's repeating instead of saying 决定 or 取 so to me that shows a sign of a limited vocabulary. I will say he's very fluent even with this limited vocabulary so I think a lot of people not just him who are experienced language learners I don't know if he's learned other languages or not actually but people who are experienced language learners can actually use their limited vocabulary in really impressive ways.
首先就是有几个因素吧。第一个是我是一个比较个子比较高的一个人，所以这是第一。
来，身高多。
So I would think that words like 身高 and 音速 are words that are approaching the B1 level or around B1. So I wouldn't say that he's really that much less than that.
身高多少？
我不知道1米。
加拿大人加拿大人都很
1.85米左右
，1.85米
，1.85米，那比成龙肯定高的，那没问题。
比成龙高，可以，你的确比他大。
对呀，有可能是这样子。然后呢，第二个
要是有可能是这样子 I think in Taiwan we just say 有可能 we don't need to say 是这样子 we don't need to add that at the end. I don't know. I'm going to watch a little bit more of this, but I think I've got a good grasp of his Chinese level already.
就是我碰到了一个非常漂亮、非常聪明、非常美好。
So 非常聪明 he said, well, he also has an interesting tone with the 不 I think.
就是我碰到了一个非常漂亮、非常聪明、非常美好以前。
八卦混阳
气。就是不算很久以前，就是我
不算很久。
碰到了一个非常漂亮、非常聪明、非常
聪明应该是聪明 So he has some tone issues. I don't know. I'm gonna pause the video real quick and just call it. But I'll watch the rest of this off camera. If I find anything noteworthy, I'll add it. But essentially, what I'm seeing from my perspective is someone who's at a B1 level in Chinese. The content of the conversation is mostly about his language abilities, so that could limit in some way, I guess, the vocabulary that's being used. But he's repeating a lot of phrases, like I said earlier, 首先选择. A lot of those things are being repeated. The vocabulary that is being used outside of that is not super advanced. The grammar that's being used is also not super advanced. I think his listening might be slightly better than his speaking because he's able to follow the conversation along, despite not using the same level of vocabulary as the other three people in the video. I do want to say, if he started learning 1 year ago and he got to this level, this B1, maybe B2 in some circumstances, that kind of level, it's still impressive, especially for someone who's been living outside of a country where it's been spoken. He's been able to create his own immersion, and he's been able to use the native speakers that he does have access to in a very, very advantageous way, because he's obviously progressed a lot. I don't know if that is 1 year. I'll take him at his word and say that he actually has only been learning for around 1 year. If that's the case, getting to this level is good and impressive, but also feasible. He's not at a C1 level, in my opinion. And if he was at a C1 level, I would doubt that it has only been 1 year. I think like I said, despite him being at a pretty high level already, it could have only been 1 year, I think. I think it's possible. Just my opinion, just my 2 cents. So that's all that I have to say about Spencer and his Chinese abilities. If you guys have questions about my input or any other things that I've said in this video about Chinese or my Chinese abilities too, leave those in the comment section below. I'd be happy to reply or even do a follow-up video if necessary. And I hope to see you guys in a future video. Peace.